Hey folks, sorry I'm a little late. The as always, core is growing bigger and bigger, and it's taking longer to get through everybody. I suspect it'll be a little bit before we get those people, so I think maybe we'll just start in and we get them when we get them. Um, all right, so a couple of new PRs this week. Let's see. There is a redo of Adam's BlueFS fine grain locking PR. In case Casey or Josh, if you don't know, basically the previous one was breaking, and so we reverted it after trying to get it over a weekend to work. But this is now a reattempt at introducing this. I think it was actually kind of a decent win, if I remember right. But it's pretty complicated. The locking in BlueFS is not super straightforward. So anyway, there's that. Casey, I saw that you have got a new PR for optimizing this request timeout issue that we hit.
Yeah, I was kind of just throwing a few things at the wall to see what helps, and it looks like they help a lot. Um, so hoping to narrow it down a little bit more. There's a custom allocator in there, and I would rather not depend on that if it doesn't help that much, but otherwise I think most of the performance regression is gone.
Nice. I threw a comment in there for Mark. If I don't know if he looked at CPU usage when he test, but that was one of the big things I saw from what I remember when I was looking at all this stuff a while back. Is that the CPU usage of greatest GW had increased dramatically. So it'd be interesting to see if beyond performance, if there's also kind of a corresponding efficiency gain.
Yeah, so I mean, my assumption is that all of these optimizations are just targeting CPU usage. So I think that's where all of the gains come from.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering if you even beyond the performance though, if you'll get better performance at lower CPU. That kind of makes sense. Like if the CPU usage gains exceed the performance gains that you saw.
Yeah, good question. I had asked for one more run, but maybe redoing the existing ones with some CPU metrics would be a good idea.
Sure. Um, if not, I can at some point possibly try to rerun some of the tests I was doing earlier. CBT will grab all of that anyway, so it's no more than just running a test. So yeah, if you don't, if Mark doesn't have any of it, then let me know. I might be able to squeeze a quick run in.
Hello
Okay.
guys. Just a quick note on extracting the perf metrics. Basically, the IOPS, the IO, the cycles per IOPS. We actually have a script called run cbt.sh that does exactly that, and it's basically used by the Crimson's perf check job for Jenkins.
Radek, if I remember right, that's only for the OSD right now, not for RGW, right?
That's correct.
So we'd need to add that, but yeah, absolutely.
Might make sense, might make sense, I believe. Basically, profiling the RGW should be possible as profiling OSD.
Yeah. It's been a little bit, but I think I had made some changes, or at least I was thinking. I don't know if I did it or not, to the CBT monitoring class. Tried to move towards being able to just use, instead of just profiling the OSD, be able to profile like arbitrary commands or arbitrary daemons.
That will be useful.
Yeah. You can get it with CollectL at least right now. If it's not as easy or as straightforward as the perf report, but you can at least get CPU usage metrics out of the CollectL recorded data. So it's still possible to get it. It's just not quite as convenient.
Cool. I appreciate the input. Let's follow up on the PR about this stuff.
Okay, sounds good, Casey. Yeah, I'll just see if Mark has anything, but if not, I can probably squeeze in a quick run and provide that. Okay, moving on.
Just a quick comment. If you do some benchmarking, there's one logging commit in there that I would prefer you leave out for benchmarking.
Okay, well, is it clear which one it is?
Yes. If you read
Okay.
the PR description, it mentions that too.
Okay, I'll take a look and try to remember to do that. Too many things to keep track of. Let's see, actually testing don't include logging PR. Okay, I've added it to my random list of things to try to remind myself. Okay, moving on. Async Messenger. Okay, we got through both of the closed PRs. New PRs. Now the closed PR that I've got for this week. Async Messenger support disabling data CRC for protocol version 2. That one had escaped my tracking until erratic. I think you added the performance tag last week. So now it has merged, it looks like. Was there anything beyond just the fact that we're disabling data CRC here? Do you remember, Radek?
I don't think so. I think it's purely about bringing back the feature we had and still have in Protocol V1. We just missed it for V2. It might it's reasonable in some arrangements, configurations that are focused solely on performance. So good to have.
Yep, sounds good. All right, a couple of updated PRs. Let's see. Bluestar set the min-alloc size to optimal I/O size. That has had a little bit more discussion. I don't remember what the latest on that was, but now you can look and see if you're interested in it. Next, Igor's PR to make the shared blob FSCK process use less memory. We talked about that a little bit last week. Looks really good. There's not been a whole lot of discussion on the PR. In fact, I think now it needs a rebase. But just based on what we talked about last week, that looks excellent. A significant reduction in memory usage during FSCK. So that looks excellent. Next, DB store, add configuration to set the SQLite performance tuning optimization. I think there were some updates to that, and there was some ongoing discussion. Sounds like that's just actively being worked on. Cabinet project would very much like to see where that goes and what performance differences we see versus standard Ceph cluster. Next, optimize objects memory allocations using pools. So this is an old PR. Well, it's old now. It's been, I think it was sometime in the summer that it was first made. There has been some discussion in the core stand-up about this. Ronan has kind of looked at it most recently, had a bunch of questions about it, very legitimate questions regarding how we allocate memory, where we allocate memory from, what strategy makes the most sense. So given that this is kind of old, I don't know if we'll see a lot of further discussion on this, but the overall topic definitely deserves a lot of discussion. Especially, I think, in the context of Crimson and what we do there. But even for Classic, it's still a good discussion to have. So anyway, that's been updated with a really good set of questions from Ronan. Next, there was an update on this PR from ukernel. Randomly distribute dir frags to multiple MDSs. That the only update is that it has been rebased. Otherwise, I'm not sure that anyone on the Zfx team has really gotten a chance to look at that. I know right now they have at least a little bit looked at the journal optimization PR that is kind of sort of tangentially related to this. So anyway, that is still being actively updated, which is really good. Hopefully people have time to really dig into it and look at it and see if it's worth trying to merge. All right, otherwise, lots of stuff in the no movement category. I made it about halfway through before I ran out of time this morning. But I suspect that there wasn't a whole lot else on this list that made it into the updated category or closed category, so I'll leave it to next week. All right, anything I missed from anyone or any other PRs that people would like to discuss? All right, well then, Neha, you had brought up that you wanted to talk about performance CI work this week, so I think if you want, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I guess we've talked about performance CI in previous meetings, but I guess I wanted to revamp some of the discussion. We also have Radek here. We have Chris, who's joined us recently and has some performance testing background, so I thought it'd be a good discussion to have. In general, yesterday I was talking to Sam as well. Radek, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. So currently, all the Crimson PRs are doing a performance check, right? But it's a very coarse-grained check, is what I heard from Sam. It's like, if the runs are. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me provide a link. Let's start maybe with how. Okay.
Radek, it'll be very useful if you can share your screen. I don't know if your internet will allow that.
Well, I'm afraid it will be a problem. Sorry, guys, for not turning the video. I tried doing the core stand up, and it was a problem. I'm in a place with very bad internet connection. But I actually have the links already opened as tabs in my Firefox, so this shouldn't take so much of time. Okay, maybe let's start with with what is actually being tested. That's a link to an example of a result set. The most interesting one, basically the main thing, the crux we take care about in Crimson is the measure for the so-called computational efficiency, which is basically numbers. It's basically number of cycles burned per I/O. Here it's the second row, CPU cycles per op, and we are testing. We are testing two things actually. One is the freshest master branch. Second one is a PR. We are just comparing. And moreover, I think that it could be there was some effort to bring this to the classical world as well. There is a commit. Okay, just take a look. It adds the classic OSD flavor that should take care about classical OSD as well. The question is, of course, about stability and availability of nodes for the perf check. And also, it's not so commonly used, so I would expect a bunch of problems. Basically, it needs some polishing.
Okay, so if we summarize the current status, the Crimson PRs are running through the performance check. There are hooks for this to glue up to classic world, but because of questions like availability of nodes, etc., we haven't enabled that.
I think so. Yep. I cannot. I went through a bunch of performance labeled PRs, and I was unable to find the results from Jenkins, which makes me think that we need to dismount everything and debug what's broken.
To add to that, Neha, I'm not sure if it's availability of nodes. We have 4 of the inserted nodes in that Jenkins cluster, from what I understand, and it looks like several of them have been completely idle. So I don't know why, but for whatever reason, it's just not doing anything.
Okay, so okay. I mean, there are still unknowns, but from what Radek has observed is that classic PRs with a performance label are still not running performance tests. So I think that's the piece we need to investigate and figure out why. So that feels like a bug fix kind of thing we need to do. But in terms of like what can we do next, what I want to hear, I think we discussed one thing where we said that we are just running Radar's bench now. We should extend this to running more workloads. And the first thing that came to our mind was FIO. So I guess that would mean this run cbt.sh script needs to support FIO, correct?
Yeah, we are. If I recall correctly, we are testing slowly with Radar's bench, which, on the other hand, is pity. On another one, well, Radar's bench is supposed to be quite similar to RBD on its hot paths. But I agree we should bring more.
Okay, just trying to find where this script is.
It's located in the SRC scripts in the main repo of Ceph.
Got it. I think I got the script. This is the link for everybody's reference. Yeah, so it's pretty much relying on CBT. So it's a matter of extending this to run FIO. And I know FIO has some additional dependencies, etc., which we need to figure out. But I guess the next project around this can be FIO. Would everybody agree?
Yeah,
yep,
it would. It should be also very easy once we have it working with Classic to add HS Bench as an RGW test as well, since it's already directly supported in CBT.
Exactly. That was the next thing in my mind. So I guess I'm curious, Chris. What are your thoughts about this whole thing, or like does your performance testing experience align with any of this automated stuff that we're talking about? I think you're still trying to figure out how to unmute. Maybe you're muted 2 ways, Blue Jeans, and okay, I think he dropped. But anyways, I was curious to hear his experience also. given that he's coming from an outside Ceph world, and what other mechanisms are used in other software projects. Yeah, go ahead.
So maybe in the meantime, there are a bunch of things to address. For instance, we are testing with the Zfx disabled. I think that even if classical OSD, even the classical flavor is being picked up, we are still disabling Zfx. This doesn't make a huge sense. Basically, it would invalidate all validity of all messenger-related PRs.
Yep.
There is a couple of things. For instance, there is also a script that makes the comparison that actually takes CBT's output directories for both baseline and the tab and the PR and compares them. It extracts metrics. Right now, I think only for Radar Bench, making it aware about CBT, about FIO would require also adding some extraction, some extractors for FIO, I believe, and other benchmarks as well. But they are not big. There aren't huge things, I think.
Radek, one thing I wanted to mention too is that CBT now can run Crimson directly, set up a cluster with Crimson across multiple nodes. So if we did want to start doing multi-node tests, we could modify run CBT to also allow you to have CBT set up the cluster.
Makes sense. At the moment, run CBT is basically a thin wrapper over vstart.sh. So it's single cluster testing. And because of that, we need to be aware that vstart started cluster has some unusual settings, like if I recall correctly, turning on logdep. It's not so good idea to take vanilla vstart cluster and start and do performance checks for classical. In Crimson we don't have logdep, so it's not a big deal. There are a bunch of things we need to polish.
Yeah. If we want to try that, now the only thing you need for Crimson and CBT is to specify version 2 for the IP for all of the hosts or all the daemons. Actually, Crimson you don't have to do, so it'll automatically do it. But for the mons, at the very least, you have to specify v2. Oh, and I see it. We have a performance CI pad here.
Yeah, I just decided to add this because I know you've been discussing a lot of these ideas, but we haven't put it down somewhere. I'm also trying to write down references to what we currently have. So what I'm seeing is configuration-wise, there are configurations that live in source test Crimson CBT. Then there is Rados K4K write and 4K read. Radek, is that all we have?
Yes, I think so. We are also limited when it comes to the chunk size.
So the Zfx disablement, where is that configuration happening?
In run cbt.sh. Let me pinpoint the line. Okay. Got it. Copying the link, and we'll paste in just a second. Okay. Here is the fragment that is responsible, the snippet that is responsible for bringing the cluster.
Yes, got it.
And dash big X means no Zfx.
Yes.
No secure mode, no CRC checking. I'm not sure about the CRC checking, but well, it's Basically, the entire Crimson's perf track is just an automation of our very rough testing we were doing at the initial stages of Crimson development. Basically, I was doing them on my machine. This is just moving the procedure and automating it.
In support of that, though, Radek, I think for most PRs we don't actually want Ceph because it muddies the waters too much. But you usually get much clearer data when you don't have things like Ceph mucking everything up, right?
Not sure.
I think the only time we want it is we're seeing PRs that affect Ceph rather than ones that, that overhead could potentially mask the changes.
But that's a big problem, I believe, because somebody would need to judge whether it's that case or not. I mean, let's say you have a PR that messes with async messenger, and we are testing without Zfx being enabled. And if somebody break something in common or in the auth component, we wouldn't notice.
I seem to remember someone telling me once that you could have different tests run based on the labels.
Yes, there is.
I think one simple way to address this would be to have like something called perf basic and like an advanced. Like when you think that there is a potential for a PR to, cause a regression because of a Ceph change or an auth change or whatever, you run the entire suite which has Ceph enabled. For minor PRs where we think, it's just, OSD change, OSD code change, and you don't need Ceph, you can just run the basic version which has Ceph disabled. So I guess it's
okay, but it still puts some necessity, some extra obligation on developers to judge. Does it qualify for Ceph testing? Well, it's human dependable, which makes me a little bit nervous. I would love to have everything automated.
If we really wanted to spend time on it, we could do some kind of like pattern matching of the source code files that were modified, right? And then make suggestions about the tests that should be run.
On the other hand, what is the main problem with testing with Zfx enabled?
So, Radek, this is something that I dealt with years ago, that question. And I don't know how bad it is now, but at least many years ago, the Zfx overhead was high enough that it was making it much more difficult to tease out changes in performance, small changes in performance to other systems.
I see. If you are testing a micro optimization that is worth, let's say, 1 or 2%, you want to minimize the entire number of cycles to make them better visible. I see.
And it may not be as bad as it used to be. We've made Zfx better, but like 6 or 7 years ago, Zfx overhead was actually high enough that it ended up clobbering a lot of other changes.
I see, but this is dependent also on the chunk size. If for 4K, it shouldn't be visible, I bet.
Maybe. I don't know.
For max, for large chunks, for sure, no doubts about it. But there was somebody quite recently was profiling an OSD, looking for overhead of CRC, and he tried both 4K and 4max. Initially starting with 4max, and then there was huge amount of cycles consumed by CRC calculation. But for 4K, it was just invisible.
I would believe that for CRC. I don't know if I believe it for Zfx. Maybe. If you give me data, I could maybe be convinced though.
I see. That's good point. That's really good point. I fully agree.
Yeah,
Let's
I guess,
profile.
yeah, we can profile. I think that goes deeper than we want to go at this point, right? We first need some size kind of before talking about, what kind of
I see.
configurations. I agree. At some level, I absolutely agree with you, Radek. Until unless there's a real problem with Ceph, there's no reason for us to disable it. And what Mark is talking 6-7 years ago, maybe we have done something better in 6-7 years. So at least let's hope that.
Neha, I will say that we made it better. Like 3 years ago, I think it was something like that. We improved it, but I don't think that we eliminated the problem. I think we just made it less of a problem. So I would still be very cautious about enabling it by default.
Well, but it is. It's enabled in default deployments. Moreover,
we've had it enabled for deployments by default forever. But I mean, for like regression or performance testing, I'd be very cautious about enabling it by default until we can prove that it's not going to make a dramatic impact on looking at these things.
Yep.
There's a reason we stopped.
Yeah. Yes, I understand your point, Mark. I guess when we have those, it's a matter of adding an extra configuration, right? So like we can test with both and we can figure out how bad it is. But I guess coming back to the basic question, I guess Radek's concerns about like non-default configuration and things that we have disabled is genuine. I think we should know about this. So I'm trying to write those down. Zfx is one. But in terms of other things, the main thing that strikes me is that we are still doing single node tests, right? We are not doing multiple node tests.
Yes, but that also is a question of what exactly are you trying to find out, right? Does running a multi-node test tell you anything about whether or not this change in a PR is better than what we had in master? And
yes,
and
that's
there are only
again
some
depends.
cases. Yeah,
exactly. That's a very narrow case again. Like which PR actually needs to go through a multi-node test.
Yeah, and some do and some don't. It's not always clear which you want automatically.
Yep.
You may have to have someone decide,
or
do both.
Yeah, just want to check, Chris, is your audio working? Maybe we can hear your thoughts as well.
Actually dialed in, if you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. I think it depends on if you're looking at multi-node client tests or not, but some things I've done which are very much in the past and they've been manual, so not part of any type of pipeline, was Yahoo has YCSB, which is more legacy now for S3 testing. But then also we can do things like through various client nodes have some sort of, I don't know of any current frameworks, but test scaling up and down various sizes of clients if we identify certain types of tests that are needed. I've had success with that in the past through various S3 type object store rudimentary things that I've created in the past at positions, but it just depends on the use case at this point.
Yeah.
With YCSB, did you guys do anything that changed like the default? I think they use like a Zfx distribution, right, for their I/O in the default test.
Right. Yeah. We mostly just did default options for a lot of things.
Okay.
Yeah, so Chris, just to give you some background, we already have something called Ceph benchmarking tool that Mark has written, and it has a bunch of workloads that you can run standalone on standalone clusters. What we are trying to do here is that automate some of this in our Jenkins pipeline so that every PR that is coming and needs performance. So we have labels in GitHub, so any PR with a performance label would run these bunch of tests, and it would give us a status whether it's a pass or a fail. Currently, what we have is some basic tests that we were just talking about. They're also listed in the pad there. It's a Rados bench test, which is essentially, it's a Ceph construct. It's a Ceph test. Rados bench is a benchmark that is run, just creates a bunch of Rados objects and does a basic I/O. But what we're talking about is extending it as well. So have something like an FIO workload running against a Ceph cluster. And given that CBT, the Ceph benchmarking tool, already has capability to do all that, it's just a matter of gluing things together here.
They have one
Okay,
one
got it,
kind
yeah.
of high-level question on all of this is that we have vstart, we have CBT, we have Topology. There's a lot of overlapping capabilities in these things, but each kind of have their own purpose, right? Like vstart, we really have target towards one node development, focused, start up a Ceph cluster quickly. CBT is kind of like multi-node, run benchmarks quickly, potentially set up a CBT or set up a Ceph cluster, but also can use existing clusters, that kind of thing. And then Topology is like the kitchen sink, or multi-tool knife of everything. It's hard to know which tool should necessarily do which things. Should we have Topology setting up clusters? Should we have CBT setting up clusters? Should we have vstart? Should we be using Jenkins for CI? Should we be using Topology for CI? There's all these kind of overlapping capabilities.
I know. Yeah, I know. At least I can tell you what I think. So I have two main goals, I would say. Today, what I see as a problem is that we don't have this automatic performance check on pull requests. So there's a lot of manual work that goes into finding out that there was a performance regression that was caused. And you have been part of a lot of those, right? Like going and doing so many bisects and like figuring out which one was that bad commit and how further back do we have to go. So anything that we can integrate in our Jenkins pipeline to be able to save that effort, I'm okay with that. And given that this Jenkins-based pipeline is already there, I feel that it's a matter of just extend. I know that there will still be regressions, there'll be corner cases, etc. But there are like straight out things that are just bad, and we've still merged them in the past. So those kind of things we want to capture. And the second part that I think about it is like a performance dashboard. Like that is something we don't have. People have to manually run tests to be able to create these kind of graphs and look at like how are we in the last month and how are we now. So if we have, and for that, I feel the tautology test that we are already running can be used. So it's a matter of just pulling out those results that are there and creating creating a dashboard of some sort. So there are two separate ideas in my mind.
Yeah. For the second one, is anyone still actively developing Pulpito, or is that kind of now?
Yes, I think Junior has done some work on Pulpito. I think Zach is back contributing and like reviewing PRs, etc. This tautology meeting has been added to the calendar. It's like 2 weekly meetings that happen. Pulpito is part of that. And I think Aishwarya as well, a little bit. So I guess there are folks who know more about Pulpito and stuff than before. So
that really seems like the logical place to put it, right? We've already got this thing for tracking runs.
Yes. So yeah, exactly. So that piece I feel that we can still talk about in the tautology / CI discussion. But this one today, what I wanted to talk about was this first part. Was like we already have this framework. How can we make this more effective and extend this further for Classic as well?
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the first thing is just, we've got this all more or less there, it looks like. Maybe just having it run different CBT tests. I don't think it really involves much beyond just, using a different YAML configuration file and then figuring out how to parse the results.
Yep, and also extending that runs CBT for FIO, right? That is one piece I feel will be needed, but I don't expect it to be too complex if you know how to just run FIO against a standalone CBT cluster. It's the extra dependencies and hooks that you need. So I think that's the next best logical and baby step I can see in this direction.
I suppose the other thing is that you'd have to just make sure that FIO is actually on the nodes. Whoever can do that, but that should be
one time. Yeah, one time.
do we need to trigger the new compilation of FIO for every single commit? Like if we expect that we might be changing something in Ceph regarding like librd, maybe we need to recompile FIO.
I guess I leave that to you. How often
Well, the client side, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm not good about it. I often am using an old FIO and I realize, I need to update this because something might have changed that I didn't, I wasn't careful about. But having said that, though, yeah.
This confuses me a little bit. Do we link the librd with FIO statically?
Let me tell you, I'm going to go out to one of my nodes and I'll find out.
Okay. Well,
it's probably dynamic. I bet it's dynamic. It's got to be, right? By default.
I think. I would expect.
Yeah, it's dynamically linked to our librd. And librados as well. So I guess there the bigger concern would be if something in FIO itself changed. But maybe we don't want that. Maybe we want to be using a static version of it until we decide to change it.
Yeah, to begin with at least.
But David Galloway's not on this. He might be able to just tell us he can like install it and then we don't have to do anything.
Yeah, we can just ping him on IRC or something. He's usually hanging around there.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm just curious, Chris. This sort of, you gave you an overview. Does this excite you? Are you interested in taking a shot at it?
Yeah, this is something that I was thinking and about being interested in, and then I heard more about it now, and it sounds like part of my expertise and my interest.
Chris, do you have much experience with the IO 500?
I do, yeah. I'm familiar with the community, and funny you mentioned that. I know it's a long shot, but IOR has a S3 experimental plugin as well for a backend.
Yeah, we talked to. Go ahead.
Oh, so that could be another avenue that we look down as well. We could look at expanding that, but then also what part of the test would make sense for object stores with IO 500. I'm a little still coming up to speed on Ceph. I don't know if we can do updates on objects or if it's just a full replace at this point, but we can do the hard writes, the easy writes, etc.
Yeah, there are limitations in terms of the object interface. Casey is gone now, I think, but we've actually had talks with the IO 500 folks, or the IOR folks, I guess, have overlap there, but about doing some of this. But honestly, we just didn't have time. I wrote an AORE backend for libcephfs back in I think around ISC 20, maybe. In any event, definitely there's lots of stuff that we could do here. And we can also take some of the stuff that we've done for the IO 500 and get into CVT and get that to be make it so that we can run IOR and MD test as benchmarks against existing Ceph clusters. All the pieces are there, we just have never put them all together. But then also extending it out and doing object-based tests for using the S3 background could be another really interesting avenue. So there's tons of stuff we could be building into this and then using with regular regression testing if we wanted as well, and just figuring out what we want to run and what we want to plug in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm actually part of the organization on GitHub still. So it would
Oh,
be
awesome.
good if we want to pursue that. That'd be a good way I can do that if
Which,
we decide to.
what's the name of
Just
that
the
organization again?
HBC.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was kind of involved for a little while, and then I got sucked back into many other things, and then I've been like absent for like a year. So it's yeah. For a long time ago, I was on like the Open SFS benchmarking work group committee for like a year or two, and then that went by the wayside too. But definitely having more people with background in that area to work on this stuff would be super nice.
Okay, I think this is a good start. I've tried to add some stuff in the Etherpad, other folks as well, if you have some ideas. Basically, what we want to do is, understand where the current problems are. I think one thing we want to debug first is why are the classic PRs with performance labels not running performance tests. That I think is the first thing to figure out. And in parallel, we can also start investigating on how to extend these workloads and add FIO support.
Now, is there any coverage that you feel like we're really lacking in terms of things that people are kind of clamoring for, or things that we're not testing well right now? I mean, I know we could do better in many areas, right? But is there anything we're really struggling to get coverage on?
You mean in terms of just performance, right?
Yeah, like in the overall picture of everything, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the main thing I feel is that the fact that these periodic performance numbers are not there for somebody to look at. I mean, if we have to evaluate in the last 6 months what kind of improvements or regressions are there in, let us say, object workloads, we don't know that answer, right? So even if there is some basic numbers that we can look at, and if we find something fishy, we go and do a broad set of experiments, etc. That in my mind is the biggest. We are currently having somebody spend those cycles, or somebody creating some charts, etc., or presentations, etc. But I guess in general, what I want is like the basic tests can be done automatically.
Yeah, we definitely could have during the Pacific, like the the one that Casey is fixing right now with this what was the PR? We had just talked about actually before a lot of people arrived. The request timeout optimization stuff. We bisected, or I bisected, I guess, and found it, and now it's being fixed. But had we known right away, we might not have merged some of those PRs in the first place.
Yep. And this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And remember, there was the other one which you and Mark Kogan were trying to chase down, and it turned out to be a really docile change, which ended up causing a huge regression in master. I think it was about debug builds.
Yeah, that was another one. I mean, it wasn't a big change, right? It was a stupid. Well, I don't want to say stupid change. It was a small change, but it was one that had a big impact, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
But I guess what the other thing comes to mind is that for that, if we take that change as an example, we wouldn't have put a performance label on it, right? But it would have caused a performance regression. So I guess the next level question is, do we run every PR? Yeah,
I'm still of the opinion that, like, if you're touching anything that changes like debug settings on builds, that needs to get labeled as performance, because that's like very, very dangerous anytime you're doing stuff like that.
Yep. So go ahead.
Related to that, is there any way, does anyone know if there's any way for us to automatically apply labels to things that like match some regular expression? Like if the change touches these things or has this like word in it, can we automatically make suggestions on labels?
Yeah, the touching things we already have, like, based on file names and directories being touched by a change, we already have automatic labels. That part is there. About regular expression matching, I am not sure, but these GitHub hooks and things are pretty neat, so there must be some way to do that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you imagine that if we're changing anything about the way the builds work with debugging or optimization flags or anything, there's probably a whole lot of pattern matching you can do there that you just apply the performance label to the PR and it gets run through stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, my method of like weekly trying to go through things and like add the performance label to PRs is probably like I'll just throw out like 50% effective maybe, right? Like I try to, but at some point my eyes glaze over and then I'm not effective anymore.
Yeah, I understand. But I'm glad you're doing that. But I guess it's also a question that reviewers need to ask themselves: that should I apply the performance label, just in case? Especially when there is going to be a performance test that will be triggered, maybe people will care about that label.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm still hopeful that we can have combinations of different labels trigger different tests, right? If there's performance and there's like an RGW tag on it, it runs through a suite of RGW tests.
Yes, that'll be ideal.
Yeah.
Okay, I think once we have our baby steps figured out, we can talk about further improvements and additions. But I guess what we have currently in the Etherpad looks like a good start.
Cool.
Anybody else have any thoughts, ideas? If not, then it's over to you, Mark.
Okay. Well, we're nearly at the end of the hour here, so I'll just open it up. Anyone have anything else that they want to bring up this week? All right. Well, then, Neha, I believe next week we have something on the agenda, and I confess I have totally blanked on what it is.
Actually, it's not next week. It's a week after next. It's on the 18th.
Ah, the 18th. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Yep.
Josh Solomon is already here. We'll also get another Ceph user who has written a wrapper on the balancer. So I'm curious to know why and what it does and etc. So 18th is if people can mark their calendars.
Sounds good. So yeah, next week then we may talk about Crimson a little bit. I've got a lot of data.
That makes sense.
All right then. So maybe next week Crimson. Week after that, definitely we'll do Balancer. So, all right. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. See you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks. Bye.